Hello, welcome back to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. How are you today, Rob?
Very well, thank you.
Excited about our new series?
Yeah, we've been wanting to do a series on emotions, primarily because emotions are so important for human happiness. And we know they play a big role in the unconscious mind.
And also transformation. Jung says that there is no transformation without emotion. So we're going to talk a little bit about the biology of emotion, the spirituality of emotion, and the psychology of emotion today. But we're going to continue this series to go deep into different emotions like anger, jealousy, love, and explore them and how they impact our life and how we can deal with them and get home for dinner. So let's talk about just what are emotions, just in general, so people can understand where we're at.
Yeah, it's certainly important to give you our perspective. That way you know where we're coming from. And by all means, if you have, let's say, practices on working with emotions that work for you, stay with those. You know, there's no need to jump ship or anything like that. Our point of view is very Jungian, very Eastern philosophy.
Very Eastern philosophizing.
We do look at the neuroscience and what it shows, and to see if we're off track, or is there some correlation there? Does it support the way we're thinking about it? But in general, our perspective is very unique in that we're not going to present the typical kind of cognitive behavioral process of working with anger or emotions,
which is more the kind of the popular way to work, and so we're going to offer just another take on it, another perspective. Yes. So when you think about emotions, what are emotions? Are they energy in the body? Are they psychological experiences? What are they? In one sentence or less.
Yeah, it's a big question still in psychology and in research, but we can think of them in the context of evolution. We needed emotions in order to understand the meaning of our experience in the world. So if you think about social interaction, it's all about emotions. It's all about what does this person make me feel and how do they make me feel. And then we read each other's faces in order to kind of infer what are they feeling about me. And so it's that reflection that's going on continuously.
Whether you're conscious of it or not.
Exactly.
Right? Because a lot of people say, I don't feel anything. Even sometimes when we train in the emotional wisdom techniques that we teach, a lot of times our coaches will run into clients that don't feel anything. And they are feeling something, they're just not conscious of it. And so everything that motivates us in life we're motivated through emotion.
Absolutely. It is the driving fuel of the mind, of the psyche. So in psychodynamic theory and Jung or Jungian psychology is definitely a psychodynamic model. What fuels those mechanisms of the mind? It's the emotions. They are the fuel for movement, motivation, inspiration, ideas, etc., dreams, etc. So let's back up a little bit and let's go into the biology. What do we know biologically that we all, kind of can verify if you go to the biology books and look it up? So we know we're dealing with this autonomic nervous system. Now the autonomic nervous system it's to distinguish it from the voluntary nervous system, meaning our ability to make decisions and move consciously, right? When I say I'm going to go get some water, that's a conscious choice. But the autonomic nervous system is operating independently of that system, of my thoughts and the will. It's doing its work automatically, thus autonomic. That autonomic nervous system is composed of two systems, and it's like a yin and yang, like a hot and cold thing. The sympathetic nervous system operates on neuroepinephrine, and it increases respiration, sweating, like I'm feeling right now, a little bit of sweat because it's warm in here. Heart rate, it kind of pumps you up and prepares you for fight or flight. Yeah. Running away or freezing or doing something that you need to be doing. The parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite side of it. It cools you down. It operates on acetylcholine, decreases arousal, decreases heart rate, relaxes you.
So it's the homeostasis, kind of those two systems keep us in a state of balance. So if we tend to be hyper, this other system will try to calm you down and need to take over. Yeah,
because you need something to calm you down after you run away from the danger or fight the battle. Something to keep the system from expanding all its energy at once. And so the parasympathetic nervous system then is that relaxation response that brings everything down and cools it down. So we have these systems, which is incredible because if you think about it, our bodies are designed to react to the environment without us having to think about it. So there's a mechanism, for example, that if something is coming at me, like somebody throws a rock at me, my system will react without me having to think, oh, there's a rock coming at me, I should lift my arm and try to deflect it. It will do it automatically, and it bypasses the brain. It doesn't have to go all the way to the brain and then back again. It simply goes right into the spinal cord, and it loops around and makes your arm react appropriately. So it's an incredible system. We're finally tuned to fit into the world. And we evolved this way for millions of years. So our earth, whether we like it or not, whether we admit it or not, is our home. It's the context of our bodies and our evolution.
So the system is really the way our inner life interacts with the outer world, quite simply.
That's right.
And then there's, so let's talk about what emotions are in a deeper way, because there are like different ideas of what they are. Is it a feeling? Is it a mood? What's happening?
So let's first of all clarify some of the words that are often used interchangeably with emotions. So feelings, not the same thing. Mood and affect. They are distinct.
So if someone says, I'm in a depressed mood, that's not an emotion.
No, but it's related, obviously. But let's say feelings, the feeling is the subjective experience in the body. And like you said, often we're afraid of that feeling. That's all. We're afraid of experiencing an emotion because the way it makes us feel.
Like one emotion a lot of us are afraid of is feeling guilt. And we just hate feeling guilty. And it's like, how do we push that away? It just feels so yucky, as a clinical term. Or anger, sometimes we don't like to feel anger, or sadness, so it's that, but it's a sensation in the body when we think about those emotion labels, but when really looking at it is a sensation. It's some kind of physical sensation in the body. And I often say that anxiety and excitement are actually the same feeling in the body. Like if you really pay attention, a lot of these emotions, the labels, have the same felt sense in the body. So we have to think about, is it the feeling in the body, and then the mind gives it a label?
Yes, and we'll talk about that when we get to the different theories of emotions. But so feeling is not the same thing as an emotion. We feel an emotion, though, right? And
that's how we know we have one. We're aware of it, so sensation-wise, right?
So it's the subjective experience of an emotion in the body. The mood is an emotional state that persists over time. So in clinical psychology, for example, they talk about mood disorders. Simply depression,
Even can anxiety, like a
Yeah,
persistent...
it's kind of a mood disorder as well, but they're often, anxiety is kind of considered
part of depression? Or?
Well, it's got its own category because it's one of the main diagnoses that people get, anxiety disorders, right? But mood disorder is often associated with depression, dysthymia, which is kind of a low-grade depression. People kind of get used to thinking, well, this is as good as it gets. I'm just going to live with this.
Like a lack of motivation or kind of lethargic kind of feeling toward life.
Exactly.
But not really like super sad, but just almost numb in a way.
Yes. So when emotions kind of persist, right, and they become the individual's way of coping with the world, then they become a mood disorder, right? Or they persist so long and or for an intense amount of time that it becomes a diagnostic criteria or a way of helping the individual identify what's going on with their emotional life. It's become a mood disorder.
And I don't know if we're going to talk about this later on in this discussion, but I noticed that even when we're kids and we're feeling a certain way, the parent would say, "Oh, you are sad," or you are being mad. You're mad, and it's like labeling the person as the emotion. Like the emotion becomes part of the persona.
Certainly, people identify with their disorders,
like that angry person, that depressed person.
Yeah. Actually, there was terminology in the past where people would say that he's a depressive or she's a depressive, meaning that that's how they identified this person, that's who they were. And then individuals often identify, right? They might say, I'm a bipolar person, or I'm a, personality disorder of some kind. Anyway, they identify with these mood states, and so it becomes part of their identity.
And that's why we don't like to feel them, the unpleasant ones, because we don't want to be labeled as, like, it's almost like it's a part of our shadow even to be expressing that emotion.
So the third term is affect, often confused with emotion as well, but affect is like the big umbrella term. So when you're talking about a person's affect, you're talking about the way they express emotions, their emotionality, their sensitivity to emotions, their those kind of things in general, like the big umbrella term. So you have feelings, mood, and affect, often used interchangeably with emotions.
So if we're feeling, we have an emotion, but we're not realizing, kind of checking in our body and noticing that it's a feeling. It's not a psychological disorder to have an emotion,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Pathologizing it. So then what are the functions of emotions? They have there's a reason why we have them.
Yeah, there's a reason they evolved, and the reason they persisted for up to this day, right? From evolutionary times or throughout evolution. First of all, they regulate arousal. So
sexual arousal?
Also, yeah. But arousal simply means like your state of alertness.
It kind of like awakens. It feels like an awakening, like something is coming alive within you. You
notice if you're interested in something, you tend to pay attention and you tend to absorb it and you tend to learn it and remember it. When you're not interested in something, that's a lot harder, right? Then you have to study and memorize and use all these techniques to try to get your brain to hold on to that information.
And that's why they say when you tell stories that have emotion, people tend to remember them more because of that. We get aroused and we're kind of more alert, and we hook into the story and the theme more than we think in logical terms.
Yeah, so they help us direct perception and attention. Right, in practical terms, that's what they're doing. The emotion is telling us this is important, pay attention. This is not important, ignore it, right? You've seen it before, you know what it is, don't worry about it. Whereas the emotion tells us this is important, hold on to it. And the mind uses that system to hold on to past experiences.
So our
deeply.
memories.
Yes, and more than memory, the unconscious mind. We'll talk more about that.
Not the conscious memories, but even.
Yeah.
So I remember that didn't make me feel good. When there's a lot of people that have like fears, like irrational fears, they would call them, about things that they don't know why they don't like this or that. Like for me, growing up, I really hated whistling. Like when I heard someone whistle, it would just like trigger me, and I have no idea why. And I think it's because maybe one of the older uncles or whatever used to do that, and I didn't have a good, kind of feeling around him, or maybe he made me feel uncomfortable. So I hear that whistle, and it's just boom, the emotion kicks in. So in a way, it's good to help us survive as well, because if we're sensing something's off, our feeling would trigger that, like a memory to warn us.
Yeah, I mean, Jung thought about intuition in those terms, that it's the unconscious mind kind of telling us what something means without us really being conscious of it or understanding why. But it goes back to those early experiences and conditioning. So another function of emotions is it influences learning and memory, like we were saying. This is important for students, people, or simply everyone that wants to learn something new. The context in which you learn it is important. So if you want to do, for example, if you want to do better on a test, try to study near the classroom, or better yet, in the classroom and in the chair that you're going to take the test.
Oh.
The context then reinforces your memory, that when you're in that chair, you're doing exactly what you're learning, right? You're able to recall it a lot better.
Well, even for me, when I would have people visualize taking a test or doing something that like public speaking, I would have them imagine themselves being in that place, feeling a good feeling. So anchoring in an emotion to the event. So it's kind of similar to that. It's almost planting a memory. So the philosophy around it is the brain or the body already feels like they already did it. So it's not something new. So you're basically creating a memory of something, and then your mind doesn't know the difference between you imagining it and what you actually do. So you're preparing it's like, oh, I've done this talk before. I've done this test before. And I'm experiencing this test. I feel this way. So that's a really great way. Emotions can help us anchor into different experiences.
Absolutely. And we know kind of the memory, smell, and learning are closely tied also. If you notice, when you smell something, it takes you back to an early memory. Like,
is it because our evolution before we were humans
It's because of the sense of smell is closely tied to the limbic system, which is the emotional part of us, as well as to the memory system, the hippocampus. So they're all kind of related, and they're all close. So they're like neighbors, and they talk to each other, and they say,
but wouldn't that be from evolution, that those before we were humans and had conscious, rational, supposedly rational thinking, that maybe early on that those systems were ancient? Because
the sense of smell is one of the oldest ones.
Yeah.
So if you think about those early sea creatures that crawled in the mud of the bottom of the ocean,
they were blind. They couldn't see.
Yeah, they didn't have eyes. They didn't need any eyes, but they could smell. They could detect chemical scents. So anyway, we digress. The other one is, of course, emotions organize and motivate behavior. Now, this is important for coaching, of course, because we know we want to motivate people to do their best and to achieve their goals and all this. The emotion is highly tied to that.
I know a lot of people, for me, you can learn everything intellectually. You can really learn a lot of different theories about your past and yourself. But until you have that emotional, with the coach, really helps you kind of organize and take those adding the emotion into it to shift that behavior, shift that understanding. It's like like a direct experience versus just an idea. Like get from the thinking to the feeling.
Well, you were a motivational speaker. I mean, how did you motivate people?
Well, you have to get them to feel.
That's right.
And most people, it's sad to say, are motivated by fear. That's the only way they'll get. It's that FOMO, that fear of missing out, that fear of I'm not going to live a meaningless life. And actually, in a way, we're going to talk about fear in the future, but I think it's actually a good thing. Because imagine if we were so complacent with our lives and we didn't really think it was important to do anything meaningful, we wouldn't have that motivation. We'd just be like, I'll just go through life, and maybe you'll have this like vanilla life, but it won't have that kind of juice. So some people are motivated by fear, other people are motivated by the possibility, but more likely it's fear. It's really the life force. And so when we talk about defining emotions, which we will, fear is not a bad thing. But if it's not used, it can be destructive. So that's how most people are motivated. Not that you would go out as a speaker and motivate them through fear, but through that. It's almost like the speaker talks about aspiration, and then the person feels this missing out within themselves, like it's arising from within the person. So the motivator is not putting fear into the people. It's basically awakening that fear of, what if I don't make something in my life? What if I'm missing out on something? And if you don't know, like when I was younger, before I listened to like everything is possible in your life, I just thought I was reacting to life. But then when you're given that idea that you can create your life, then all of a sudden it's like, I can't like just sit on my bum and wait for, myself to be discovered. I have to go make it happen. And it creates a sense of kind of movement and urgency, which I think is good.
Yeah, that's
and then also being in a community of people that are moving and creating things in your life, that also generates fear. Not the community doesn't generate the fear, but in the person who's not moving forward, and it makes them say, well, I could do that too. Why am I not doing that? And so it helps everyone be better, everyone grow.
That's interesting. Yeah, because you would think, well, motivational speakers are inspiring people and getting them to move, but you're saying no. The other side of the coin is the fear that the individual is working with continuously, and I guess that's what has held them back, right?
And there are some people that use fear, motivational people that use fear to, get people to buy stuff and all that.
No, I mean
there's all that, but it's in the person, that the person's the one. No one can actually put fear into you. It's like your own, like if it's ripe for you, it's like it's awakening that part of you that wants to grow. And then there's this fear of, what if I don't? And, life is going by, and we should have that urgency because we're only here for, a certain amount of time. We should feel that.
Got it. Okay, one last one. The functions of emotion. The last one is communicate with others, right? We communicate through our passions, through our feeling, through our friendship, through our
romantic
anger,
relationships,
through romance, through all these emotions really make then life and our experience with other people very rich, colorful, meaningful. And so without emotions, man, it would be a bland world without much passion in it. But because we do have these rich emotional life going on within us, then we're able then to connect to people in this real way. And
I think for you, like you studied earlier in your career about worked with kids with autism. And so a lot of that, it's not that they don't have emotion, but they don't know how to express it. Do you think that's why they have a hard time communicating with other people? They don't have that ability to connect on an emotional level? They seem to be more rational and practical.
That's one of the theories, that it's they call it sometimes the extreme male mind.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
That if you did think about how we think about men, and take it to an extreme, right? There would be that would be autism, right? That we think almost like Mr. Spock or Dr. Spock, right? It just rationalizes everything and doesn't really tap into the emotions.
But you had said to me many times that men and women both have the same kind of emotions, not, that just men aren't socialized to express them as much as women are. Do you think that's why women have like a lot of bigger, like they're able to do more community work, and where men are kind of have a couple good friends, but they're not, they don't have that as this. I mean, of course, there's exceptions to every rule.
No, and in general, but we know we tend to use these stereotypes as shorthand because the brain, that's how it works. It tries to categorize things and kind of tag them, label them as a shorthand for memory. But the world doesn't really work that way, right? Everyone has an emotional life. If you think, why do people love music? Because it makes them feel. It's touching the very deep parts of the nervous system, the limbic system, the emotional brain, and it gives you that great feeling, right, of taking you back to certain places or certain emotions. And so, the idea that men don't have emotions is really ridiculous.
And I think it's just about how do they present themselves and express it. I also think too, when you say go back to memory, if we think back, if you remember, when you think about all your memories of your life, like the peak moments of your life, we do this exercise in our with our coaches and our students about how to look at those moments. And what we notice is that there's always an emotion tied to it. Like you don't remember, January 17th, 2004, you don't remember, unless something happened that day that, like a big, public event, but it was just like, but you would remember, that's the day that my dog died, or that's the day that I broke up with my boyfriend, or that's the day that I got this new job. You would remember those memories, maybe not the date, but you would have those memories because there's an emotion attached to it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So one last thing for this kind of overview. So we're all on the same page. We're going to talk about basic emotions. So what are basic emotions? Sadness, contempt, anger, disgust, surprise, and fear.
So when you say basic, what does that mean? It's like the foundation?
So some of the early research, they were looking for what are the emotions that everyone on the planet can recognize on a face. And so on
a face, that's interesting.
Yeah,
because
just
before
looking
we
at
had
face.
Verbal, when we were apes, we had to look at facial expressions.
That's right. We evolved in social groups. And so face recognition, being able to read what's going on with this person just from looking at them, their body language, that was a big part of it.
And isn't that transcultural too? Like right now, if you made a face of any of these emotions, like sadness, contempt, or anger, I'm trying to make them all surprised, no matter what language you speak, there's like or culture you're in, we recognize that expression.
Yes and no. Because these basic emotions, it was the start of research into emotions, but it's still around. I mean, it's still important. Sadness, contempt, anger, disgust, surprise, and fear, because they are universal, right? This is like the big building blocks of human interaction.
And we need all of them. We can't
need all of them.
Not get rid of contempt forever or get rid of fear forever. Like we're going to be fearless.
No, we're not trying to get rid of anything in understanding emotions. We're just trying to understand what are their functions and how can we deal with them in a more enlightened way.
And I think we should always check in too to see, have we felt all these? Are we allowing ourselves to feel these six basic emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. First, it's about understanding what they are, because if we don't have a name for it, we often don't know what to do with that emotion, right? It's a feeling, like we were saying, it's a sensation in our body, but what is it? If we don't have a definition for it, then we're not able to talk about it.
I think we're missing one. What about joy?
Oh, that's right. Happiness, joy. But we'll get to that later.
Okay.
The problem with this early research of, the basic emotions was that it didn't take into account how different cultures label these emotions.
Because some of them, it's a stigma to express.
That's right. And in some cultures, of course, they're more boisterous. They're allowed to express
Passionate,
emotions.
yeah.
Yes. And in other cultures, those are considered taboos. You don't do that in public and those kind of things. So it's a good start, but it's been kind of debunked a little bit, or kind of put on the under the spotlight just to examine what is really going on, or is this a valid way to proceed into the research of emotions. So it's more nuanced now. People are starting to think more in evolutionary terms. Like, what are these emotions? What role are they playing in the way we socialize, in the way we learn, in the way we create technologies, etc. But they're still important, like you say. And we'll be talking about anger and fear, sadness, all these things a little bit more. Happiness, of course, and joy as well. So some of the self-conscious, or what I call social emotions: shame, guilt, envy, and empathy. There are others, but these are the big kind of social ones that help us relate to other people.
So would you say the basic ones are more about survival, and the social ones are like a little higher level of expression? Not that these are also about social survival, but it's more like this one is more about physical survival.
Yeah, I would say that the basic ones are talking about your internal experience, right, of what you're feeling towards life, towards situations, towards other people. Whereas the self-conscious ones, they're helping you regulate, and they're giving you important information about the relationships.
So you can have fear about an object, where this one is more self-conscious and social around another person. So you're not jealous of your car, you're not jealous of, an inanimate object, but with a person, there's jealousy, guilt.
Yes.
And it's more about being in the community, and more about social survival and belonging.
Not only survival, but social building, because
it's important.
It's important to build good relationships with people, and shame and guilt give you information as to when you're screwing up, right? When you've done something wrong, you've hurt somebody else's feelings, you've transgressed against their boundaries, or something has happened, and it gives you that heads up. You need to repair this relationship. You need to say you're sorry. You need to make amends, anything like that, right? So really important emotions. And if you're not aware of them, right, if you're not really kind of paying attention to these emotions as they arise, then you miss those cues, and you go on and kind of messing up relationships, creating chaos everywhere you go, et cetera, et cetera. Envy. This is there's some recent research with monkeys. The researcher would give one monkey a grape, which is considered high value in the monkey community because of its sweetness. Yeah. And the other monkey, he would get like a piece of celery, low in the in the value scale. So the monkey that got the celery would observe the other monkey get a grape, and what he did after a while, right after a few trials, fair, right? he would throw the celery at the researcher.
So it's like a fairness thing, right?
That's right. It's built into our evolution to look at what's going on socially.
So is that why people have a problem with money? Because they feel, don't take it all. Like, you don't want to be greedy. You don't want to, and then if you don't have it, and it's like, it's not fair. It kind of drives those sort of feelings of, well, and if you think about our social structure, it's all about economics and what economic pocket you are in, and your identity and your value according to that.
Well, if you think about office politics.
Yeah. Who gets the corner office?
Yes. Who gets the boss's attention? Who gets the corner office? Who gets the raise? How much money?
Who gets the accolades in the meetings? And
that's right.
Gets to go to dinner with the boss.
Yeah. So as human beings, if we don't understand these processes that we call emotion, then we're blindly reacting to these things and thinking that it's an unfair world, it's an unjust world, and we get angry. Then anger takes us into aggression and bitterness and getting sick, and God, it escalates and it leads us in these spirals that are not very healthy, not very productive, not very enlightening.
Well, let's talk about emotions as a part of conditioning, because we make all our decisions emotionally. So if we're in a situation, let's say that the boss is giving Mary all the promotions, and then we're feeling this feeling, is it the creating of our lack mentality creating that experience? Like when we look at the emotion, we can either feel like the victim and feel like get retribution or whatever, or we can take the emotion and actually go, oh, that's interesting that I'm jealous. I actually secretly want to have that promotion. And what am I doing? How am I thinking? Where's my energy going to why I didn't get that? Why am I not creating that in my life? Versus feeling, I think a lot of times we just take our emotions for face value and, oh, I feel this way and I'm justified because of X, Y, and Z, and we don't take personal responsibility for unconsciously what we've created, and that's why the affect is showing up the way it is.
That's right. Yeah, so if you think about the way we're trained, it's all about cognition. I mean, almost nothing on emotions. And your parents as well. And so they don't know how to teach a child about their emotions. They just say be nice and all that good stuff, of course. But they don't.
When you're being bad when you're angry.
Yes.
When you're being bad when you're sad. Or even crying. I've had clients who say their parents told them, don't cry. Don't you cry. I'll give you something to cry about, right?
Stiff upper lip as our
be a man, like, especially
and
boys, right? They're conditioned to hide more than the girl. The girl gets coddled more.
Yeah.
And then if you're not, then you're thinking the world is not going to take care of my emotions anyway, so let me just push them down.
Yes. Many different ways of dealing with emotions, but except in this kind of conscious, enlightened way of understanding what are they, what do they mean, and how do we work with them.
So in answer to our question, can emotions heal us and help us, or can they hurt us?
Both. They can be our best friend, or they can be our worst enemy. Right.
If we feel that the emotion that we're feeling is the cause is external, then it feels very constricting and powerless, because we feel like the circumstances out there need to change for us to feel something inside.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. And so let's say in the office situation, in the office politics situation, we know we're going to have to stay, or let's say we want to continue to work there, right? We're going to have to deal with the situation. So the question is not, do I rage or do I, tell on Mary or something?
Send a memo like they did in that movie with Tom Cruise, where you send a memo to everyone.
Yes. But let's say the approach is to understand that this envy is a natural part of our evolutionary history, and therefore I'm going to feel it in my body, and it's going to come up as a question, right? When somebody's getting something unfairly, or I'm observing, or even that my mind is interpreting that way, I'm still going to feel it. So that feeling, then the question is, what do I do with it? Right? Do I buy into it as a reality, or as an absolute situation that I can only react through anger or disgust or running away
or quitting my job and going again, and
or is there a way that I can acknowledge that emotion? Because what a lot of people do is repress it as well,
or they
right?
want to get rid of it, get rid of this feeling. It's negative. It's not spiritual to feel envy. It's bad. It's not godlike. It's not Christian to feel envy. It's like a deadly sin or something. It has a lot. All these like supposedly negative emotions have a lot of heaviness around them, judgment.
Yeah. So the ideal is then to recognize these emotions and to understand that I can still take action without necessarily pushing the emotion away, but also without buying into it. In other words, I'm not buying into the anger, into the envy. I'm working with it. I'm staying with it, recognize it, and doing something with that energy. But I'm going to take action with non-attachment, with non-aggression. In other words, not out of the emotional reaction, but out of then rationality.
Well, here's a quick question that I ask people when they're feeling an emotion that is unpleasant. I ask them what their secret wish is. And their secret wish, like if you could wave a magic wand and this situation with your boss and the other colleague who got the promotion, if that could play out, how would you like it to play out? Well, I'd like it to play out where I am getting the promotion and I am, getting the accolades. And then we look deeper into it. And then what we really find out in the shadow is that what we're projecting onto the person who got the promotion is our shadow. And we're seeing that there's something maybe we don't want people to be envious of us. So we, how much of our life do we play in the background? We don't want to be bragging. We don't want to be kissing up to the boss. We want to we don't want other people to think badly of us. So then we don't get that raise. And then it's like by examining that envy and looking at both sides and saying, well, what is this about? Then you can make a conscious choice. Then you can say, you know what, I actually do want that raise. And I'm not attached to how people feel about it. And I'm not attached to getting it. But I feel like I want to make it a choice now. Versus it's this unconscious, something in me is disturbed, but I don't have any power. And you just get all your power back. So that's the beauty of emotion. I think of it as, I was telling you this analogy. It's like when I was a kid, we'd go fishing all the time and we'd have those bobbers. And the emotion is kind of like when you put the fishing pole in the water and the fish is hooked onto the hook, it pulls the bobber down. So it's like when we're hooked, it's almost like these unconscious parts of ourselves are tugging. And the part that we can see is that bobber, which is the emotion. We're feeling the sensation in our body and it's saying, ooh, there's something here. And we're going into the unconscious in the water to retrieve that fish. What is that? And I'm sorry for all those vegetarians out there. We always threw them back. So we didn't eat the fish. But it really is that kind of thinking of it. It's a good thing to feel these triggers because they are opening us up to where we're not in our choice, where we're just reacting to life. And it's always an opportunity, whether it's disgust, jealousy, anger, or even joy. Like, why am I so attached to this feeling of joy, even like what am I giving so much power to? Like when we get infatuated with a partner or get infatuated with a dream that we have, how attached we can get to it.
Yeah. But you're jumping ahead. We'll definitely talk more about the particular and individual emotions and what they mean for us and how to work with them, as well as the unconscious mind and the shadow that you mentioned. But now let's stay on this big topic, right? So we've looked at the biology or a little bit of the biology, a little bit of the psychology of how we experience these emotions, and then the spiritual element, which is something we want to touch upon.
Yes. Because
almost all religions, all spiritual traditions mention emotions in some form or another, right? Some villainize them and they say, the emotions are the devil. In a sense, they're like the things that are going to lead you into temptation, down the wrong path, into sin. Let's get rid of them. Let's suppress them, or let's find a way to beat it out of us. And others are more enlightened, and like in some of the Buddhist practices, they work with difficult emotions in a meditative way and try to approach them that way. From our perspective, it boils down to the worldview that these traditions have kind of come up in.
Mm-hmm.
Eastern traditions were developed in a paradigm where it was a conscious universe, or it's a conscious universe. In other words, we're not dealing with kind of biological machines or animals like in the Western models that are out for themselves, out to survive. Or we should say not only dealing with that, but we're dealing with these higher elements in the mind, in consciousness, that allow us to transcend our biological conditioning, our biology in a sense. In the West, though, the emphasis has been on evolution and on a material universe. So that's a very different paradigm. And what a lot of people have been trying to do is kind of mix the two. And that has kind of been confusing. And from our point of view,
can you give an example?
Yeah, it's been a disaster because what's been happening is that the spiritual practices that have come down from traditional cultures and Eastern wisdom have been medicalized now. Because Westerners are seeing things through the therapy model.
Yes.
Through the fixing model, through the cognitive model.
Diagnosis and treatment.
Yes.
There's something broken, we got to fix it.
Yes. Nothing wrong with it. It has its part. But when you apply it to transformational spiritual practices,
personal growth, spiritual growth,
then you're doing a great disservice to everyone. To the tradition that it comes from, and to the people that want to learn these things
or want to improve their life. But if you keep treating them as if they're broken, then it's almost like a self-defeating prophecy for them, because you're projecting on that there's something wrong with them to them, and how can they become potentials if you think there's something wrong with them? It really comes from that idea of the coach or the teacher seeing the client as pure potential. And
Absolutely.
That the things that they're experiencing, no matter what they are about possibility. And there's something here, like I was talking about the emotion, like not medicalizing this idea of envy. Like, oh, it's bad, and let's clear the envy out. Let's take the energy of envy and let's like dissolve it and make it love. And that kind of like treatment of an emotion as if it's something, there's something off about it, instead of something that it's going to help us grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's a normal experience that we should all feel, and there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, it goes back to these paradigms again, because if you think, well, a paradigm, let's say we can think of it as the structure or the framework that we use to understand something. So if we use a materialistic paradigm to understand emotions, well, we think, okay, there's good and bad, right? There's good and bad emotions. How do we know they're bad? Because they feel bad in our body. And when we approach it from that point of view, then anger, envy, anything that feels bad in us or yucky, we tend to label as evil, bad, and we want to get rid of it, right? Again, that medical model then of fixing, of getting rid of, that's a symptom, that's pointing to some kind of disorder, some kind of disease. Let's medicalize it. Let's throw some medication at it, surgery or
give
something.
it a label of a dysfunction.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if we approach it from that consciousness paradigm, a conscious universe, we're thinking everything is awareness, everything is consciousness. These emotions are here to teach us. They're part of the training of being a human being.
There's
part
nothing,
of the human
there's
experience.
nothing that there's nothing that doesn't include, is not included in consciousness.
That's right.
That doesn't belong. Everything belongs.
Now, a lot of those traditions, they do not neglect suffering. Of course, of course, we go through these difficult experiences in life. We experience the loss of loved ones, illness, the death of friends and parents, and all these very difficult things. But they say that is part of human suffering. And if you notice, it's universal. You can say, well, some people suffer more than others. Maybe, yes, their circumstances are more difficult, more intense. But in general, they say all human suffering is kind of the same thing, and all humans, because we are conscious beings and we live in a conscious universe, are capable of transcending human suffering. Everyone. No one gets left behind. Everyone is capable of transcending human suffering. Very different models, but you see that when people try to interpret some of these Eastern enlightened traditions from the materialistic therapy model.
It's like East and West, like two different minds are trying to look at the situation.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to learn, of course, from Eastern traditions and bring it into therapy or medicine. But you have to be aware of these things. If you're not taking into consideration the paradigms under which they were created, then you run that risk.
Well, you'll interpret it differently. So if you grew up in a Western society, like most of us have, we tend to see things as negative and positive, good and bad. You hear people change your negative thoughts to positive thoughts, your negative emotions to positive. There's supposedly a hierarchy of emotions, or these emotions are better to have than the negative and dark emotions. And then we end up sort of trying to fix ourselves all the time. We're trying to attain this perfection that as a human being, it's hard. And part of being human is making mistakes and having the drama of life. We don't want to live this vanilla, like high lightness floating around and not really feeling the deliciousness of the pain of a lost one. It reminds us how much we love and how much that meaning that person had for us. If we don't feel that pain, it's like that person didn't mean anything to us. So do we want that? No, we want to approach it as nothing's wrong. This is like a tender, I hope someone cries when I'm gone, you want someone to mourn as who you love. And so it really is that dropping the judgment over all of these emotions, because the Western world tends to put things in categories and labels and judgments to kind of create this kind of perfect state. And not really letting people be human, and almost dehumanizing people that are angry or having these feelings. And then that's why we create in Jung's psychology, the shadow, because we are taught socially, do not show these emotions, do not express yourself that way. You don't want to be labeled that. And it basically creates that conflict.
Yes. So one of the things that we want to talk about in this series is this idea that the question of how have our past experiences impacted our current situation? From the Western model of memory and trauma. Trauma is a big topic right now. It's
like the hot topic in personal growth.
Yes. From that perspective, when you experience difficult emotions in your past, that these emotions traumatize you. That's the concept, right? These emotions traumatize your mind, and therefore you're injured somehow, and now you need a medical treatment, therapy. It's a medical model. That paradigm now then puts you, let's say, if you buy into it, right? We know the way consciousness works and the way the mind works. We've talked about it in other podcasts. Is that what we believe becomes like the vessel that we pour consciousness into. We're pouring our awareness into this model of brokenness. So both the therapist and the client now have bought into this idea.
Or even coaches. Some coaches do like therapy and they don't even realize it, that they're doing that.
That's
kind of
right.
taking the role as a therapist for the client, which is not really what coaching is about.
Yes. But that means now that the only place you can, that the therapist or the coach can take the client now is to that fixed mode. And the fixed mode is just kind of the baseline of human functioning.
Kind of like we say, like a normal functioning.
Yes. Back to normality.
Yeah, back to normal. I'm getting back to normal. It's like you're already normal. Like I always think of it as a deficit. You're approaching the therapist or the coach is approaching the client or patient as they have a deficit. And it's like going into the well and digging them out of that well so they can be on the surface. Where in a potential-based model, they're already on the surface. You're teaching them how to climb to the other level. So it's a very different place than, oh, you poor injured person, you need to go, I have to dig you out of this well first. And sometimes we feel like we're always in that well. For me, I was in that well for years thinking, I was in that paradigm of something's wrong with me. And that's why I don't have the things I love. That's why I'm not happy with my life. That's why I don't have love. That's why I don't have the success I want. Because something is wrong with me. I need to fix the patterns.
Yeah. Now, we know there are people that do need that model because there are people that go through wars and through famines and through terrible things
and
in their life.
Even severe trauma.
And sometimes as children, they go through these difficult things. So definitely it's a useful model to have. But again, it's like in Western medicine. We know that Western medicine is very good at treating acute problems. Like if I break a leg or get an infection, I'm going to go to the hospital, of course. I'm not going to go to a healer or I'm not going to go meditate. I need to take care of this problem. So it's the same kind of analogy here. When you're traumatized, you need a therapist, a psychiatrist, etc. But when you're doing spiritual development, you don't need to medicalize your life and say, there's something wrong with me. I'm not happy.
My soul is wounded in some way. Yeah.
Or I think in those terms, the Eastern paradigm of a conscious universe simply says we acknowledge human suffering. Of course it's happening. Of course we know, and you have experienced suffering in your life, but the self in you, the awareness, the pure awareness in you cannot be damaged by any of those experiences. Now, if you approach the mind that way, you're pouring your awareness, your consciousness into a much different vessel, a possibility. And you're going to now, your work in spiritual development is going to take you to very different places than if you start off from that medicalized spiritual model.
You spend years just getting out of the well, and then you're like, oh, okay. If you're out of the well already, you can go on your journey and create something new instead of just staying stuck in the past. Reprocessing. I did that for so long. It was like reprocessing and reprocessing. Every time I went to a workshop, it was like, let's work on your daddy issue, or let's work on this thing that happened. You're confident. And it was just like constantly working on myself. I hear a lot of people say, I'm so exhausted from working on myself. Well, let's just stop working on yourself. Start creating yourself. Start creating instead of work. It's like, it shouldn't be work. And I think more people would do personal development. I think the world would be more open to it if they saw it less as and there'd be less shame around it if we kind of see it as, I'm making myself even better. I'm not I'm not damaged, and I need help. I think people would approach it with more confidence and be more willing to do the work.
Yeah. And the key point, the emotions are not neglected. They're included in the work, but it's from that perspective of a conscious universe, meaning that the awareness that's dealing with the emotions, that is aware, the self in you that is aware of those emotions, is not damaged by any of the emotions. It can work with them, it can direct them, it can use the energy of that emotion for motivation, for growth, for creativity.
And self-examination and self-exploration. And so we want to integrate. Jung was big on integration, We want to integrate, not get rid of anything. We want to take all the parts of being human, the dark and the light of being human, and then also the light from our higher awareness of who we really are. And we want to bring them into a full, empowered person. So that's what the series is going to be about. Next week, we're going to talk about the destructive power of emotions, like how they can really kind of take us down some dark paths, and how we can get out of it if we fall into those traps. So we'll see you next week. A lot of info today. It's an extra long episode, but we wanted to lay the groundwork. So hope you enjoyed all the context that we're going to be presenting in the series. Yes,
feel free to comment, ask questions. Of course, we look at those questions and use them to kind of design our talks, our podcasts. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's a link on the bottom that you can click on to subscribe, and check us out on iTunes. And if you feel moved, we'd love to hear a review. Leave an honest review. We'd love to hear them, and it also helps us get more people listening to the show. So another ending to another great episode, Rob. I thought this was really good, of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind, and we'll see you next week.
See you soon.
Take care.